All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're talking about how to build a really solid, secure foundation for all your stuff on AWS, and we're going to do it using a service called Control Tower. You know, when you first start with AWS, it kind of feels like you've just been handed the keys to an empty plot of land. You've got big dreams, right? You want to build something incredible. But where do you even start? How do you make sure the foundation you pour and the walls you put up create a secure home in the cloud, one that doesn't just fall into chaos the second you start to grow? Well, that's the big question we're going to answer today. So let's talk about that foundation. In the AWS world, we're not talking about concrete and steel. We're talking about a concept they call a landing zone. A landing zone is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a pre-built, secure spot that's all ready for your applications to land and start running. The really important words to remember here are well-architected and multi-account. This isn't just one account. It's a whole setup built using AWS best practices to give you a really safe and organized place to start. So what happens if you don't do this? Well, you might just start spinning up new accounts left and right whenever a new team asks for one. And trust me, that leads to absolute chaos fast. Suddenly, you've got different security rules everywhere, billing is a total mess, and you have no idea what's going on. It's exactly like trying to add a bunch of new rooms to your house without any kind of blueprint. It's going to get messy and, frankly, pretty dangerous. And this is where AWS Control Tower is such a game changer. If that landing zone is our blueprint, then Control Tower is the expert construction crew that shows up and builds the whole thing for you, automatically. Seriously, with just a few clicks, it sets up your entire multi-account environment, baking in all the best practices for security and logging from the absolute get-go. Okay, so our construction crew is ready to go. Let's take a look at the blueprint they're using and figure out how they actually structure this new cloud headquarters of yours. First things first, why so many accounts? Why not just dump everything into one giant account? Well, splitting things up into multiple accounts is absolutely critical. It keeps different projects and environments separate. So if something breaks in, say, a development account, it has zero effect on your production stuff. That's huge. It also makes it way easier to see who's spending what, and it gives your teams the freedom to experiment safely in their own little spaces. Right out of the box, Control Tower creates a few essential rooms for you. It organizes them into something called organizational units, or OUs. You get a security OU. Think of this like the locked security office for the whole building. This is where your log archive account lives, storing all the activity logs, and an audit account for your security folks. And you get a sandbox OU. This is a safe playground for your developers, which is amazing because it means they can test new wild ideas without any risk to anything else. Now, let's zoom out and look at the master blueprint. What you're seeing here is that bigger picture. You can see those foundational OUs that Control Tower just made for us, but you also see how you can build on top of it. You can create your own OU for workloads with separate production and test accounts inside. You can make another one for shared infrastructure services. It's a really clean, logical way to organize everything that's designed to grow right along with you. Having a great building design is one thing, but it's not really secure until you have locks on the doors and maybe an alarm system. In our cloud home, we call these controls, and they're the key to good governance. So what is a control exactly? Just think of it as a rule that you can apply to a whole group of accounts at once. For instance, you could set up a control that says, nobody is allowed to turn off logging in any of the production accounts. It's a super powerful way to make sure your policies are being followed everywhere, all the time. And these controls come in three main flavors. You've got preventive controls, which are like a deadbolt on a door. They physically stop someone from doing something they're not supposed to. Then there are detective controls. These are like your security cameras. They can't stop the break-in, but they'll see it happen and immediately sound the alarm. And then there's this really cool new type, proactive controls. These actually scan your code before you even try to deploy it, stopping you from even creating something that would break the rules. Control Tower makes this super easy by splitting them into two groups. First, you have mandatory controls. These are turned on for you, and you can't turn them off. They're there to protect the absolute core of your landing zone. Then you have a huge library of optional controls. These are all based on best practices, and you get to pick and choose which ones you want to turn on for which groups of accounts. And here is a perfect example of why those mandatory controls are so vital. One of them automatically makes it impossible for anyone, and I mean anyone, even a top-level admin, to delete that central bucket where all your logs are stored. This guarantees that your audit trail is always safe and can't be tampered with. For security and compliance, that's just non-negotiable. All right, our building is up, the security systems are wired. Now it's time to flip the switch on the utilities. The power, the networking, all the stuff that actually makes the building usable. In AWS, these utilities are things like authentication, networking, and logging. So think of authentication as your keycard system. It decides who gets into which rooms. Networking is like all the hallways and corridors that connect everything together. And that centralized logging we talked about, that's your security camera system, with all the feeds going back to one central security desk. So let's talk about those key cards. Authentication. Control Tower sets you up with a service called IAM Identity Center. What's so amazing about this is that you can plug it right into your company's existing login system, whether that's Azure AD, Okta, or something else. So if you look at the diagram, you can see how it works. Your employees just use their normal company password, that login gets checked by your existing system, and once it's approved, IAM Identity Center seamlessly gives them the right access to the right AWS accounts. What's the bottom line here? No more creating and managing hundreds of separate AWS passwords. It is so much simpler and a heck of a lot more secure. And let's quickly touch on those security cameras again, that centralized logging. This is another one of those things that Control Tower just takes care of for you. It automatically turns on CloudTrail to log every single action and AWS config to track every change to your resources. And then all of those logs from all of your accounts get funneled right into that one super secure storage bucket in your log archive account. It just works. So we've done it. We've gone from a totally empty lot to a fully built, secure, and powered-up cloud headquarters. So let's take a step back and think about what this actually means for the business. What do you get for building it the right way from the very start? So why does all this matter? Look, the whole point is that when you use Control Tower, you're not just setting up a few accounts. You are building a foundation that can actually scale with your business. You're getting governance baked in from day one, not as an afterthought. You get one place to see everything, which makes things like compliance audits way less painful. And because you've automated all the setup with best practices, your teams are free to stop worrying about infrastructure and start focusing on what they do best, innovating and building incredible new things. At the end of the day, AWS Control Tower provides you with a secure launchpad. It does all that heavy lifting, all that foundational work for you, so you can just hit the ground running with speed and with confidence. So really, there's only one question left to ask. Now that your foundation is set, what are you going to build next?